If I could ask everyone to kindly silence their cell phones. We come together this morning to give Kavod Acharon, final honor to Eurchie Fisch, Mordechai ben Eliakim Getzel v'Tzipora Malka. Beloved husband of Rosemary, beloved father of Marie and Pinny, of me and Gabi, beloved grandfather of Eliyahu and Jen, Yosef, Shmuel and Miriam, Zechariah and Eliana, Moshe and Aviva Rosenthal, and Sam and Dena, Lily, Ben, Ellie, and Ami Gelman. He was also a treasured family member and beloved friend to so many, adored by nephews and nieces and great-nephews and great-nieces and members of his extended family. There are a number of people who have joined us this morning to offer words of hesped, words of eulogy and tribute. Before we get to those, we're going to start with a Tehillim, and I'm going to ask Rabbi Freundlich from Congregation Beth Shalom to please come here to recite some Tehillim.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, Adonai istashayar b'tzeini, al mei menuchos yinahaleini, nafshi yishovev yancheini v'maglei tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech b'geit zalmo, ves lo ira ra ki ato imadi, shiftecho mishanetecha, hema yinachamuni, taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzayre rai, dishanto v'Hashem en roshi, Kosi Levaya, Achtov v'chesed yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veis Adonai li'orech yamim.
Sometime late last night, I thought it would be a good idea to give everyone here some investment advice. If you've been investing in Costco, I think now you should stop, because it just seems that my father-in-law loved shopping at Costco, and especially buying those gigantic containers of chocolate-covered almonds and pretzels. So it's going to take Costco a lot of customers to make up for my father-in-law's shopping sprees there. And in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, Gabi took him on a virtual shopping trip. Well, she on her phone, she faced the camera outwards, and as she was rolling the cart through Costco, my father-in-law was enjoying the trip. In many ways, my father-in-law Eurchie was like Mordechai HaYehudi. His name was Mordechai. It was like Mordechai HaYehudi, who we are going to read about in just a few hours. And when I think about him, I think about what the Megillah says about Mordechai. Mordechai lo yichra v'lo yishtachaveh. Mordechai would not kneel or bow low. My father-in-law had a lot of reasons to break and to give up hope. He was a survivor of the Shoah, as many of us know, who lost his father when he was a baby. And he came to America as a little boy, didn't speak English. He was raised by a widowed mother who, with her own brand of heroism, managed to rise above the darkness. So our Mordechai would have been excused if he bent, if he broke, if he gave up. But he didn't. In fact, with the help of his family He executed a vinahafochu. He turned darkness into light and sorrow into joy. And you will hear from others about his smile and his unending love for his family. There is another way that Mordechai ben Eliakim Getzel mimicked the Mordechai of the Megillah, Mordechai lo yichra v'lo yishtachaveh. Zaidi, as I called him, I'm not sure why that happened, was a man of principle. Lo yichra v'lo yishtachaveh. He held on to his principles. And I recall many conversations and comments where he would express his strong love for Israel and his lack of patience or sympathy for her detractors. But mainly his principles were love of family, a deep devotion to Yahadut, and love for all Jews. It can be said about my father-in-law what it says in the Megillah about Mordechai, Ki Mordechai Yehudi, Gadol Yehudim, V'ratzui l'rov echav, Doresh Tov l'amo, V'dover Shalom l'chol zaro. For Mordechai, the Jew, was highly regarded by the Jews and popular with the multitude of his brethren. And here, I'll use preacher's privilege. According to the Rashbam, Ratzui l'rov echav really means Ratzui l'chol echav. Everybody loved Eurchie, as we know. And he sought the good of his people and interceded for the welfare of his kindred. And we know that is true too. That he would give the shirt off his back for anyone who needed help. He defended what his people did, and in turn, he was loved by so many. I remember going to shul with him in Bell Harbor and how so many people would just hover around him to chat and to take in his good vibe. And finally, we are told of Mordechai, Vayihi Omein et Hadassah, that Mordechai raised Esther. Omein, according to the Midrash, means that Mordechai was a teacher and a protector. And my father-in-law was both of those things. He taught us, his family, integrity and virtue, and he taught us the value of hard work. And he was also a protector. For him, his family was everything. No simcha was too far away. No cousin was too distant or too far down the family tree. And no request made of him was too great. Nothing gave him greater joy than opening his coveted, close to the beach driveway to cousins who could come and park there and enjoy a day at the beach. Nothing put a smile on his face more than sharing a l'chaim with his grandchildren. And nothing gave him more satisfaction than seeing his children and his grandchildren around his table. Because of all of this, those privileged to be called his family and his friends, all of us had their lives enriched and deepened and filled, again, as it says in Megillat Esther, with Ora, Simcha, Sason, Vikar, with light, with gladness, with happiness, and with honor. And for that, we are ever grateful. And I just add on a personal note, I'm ever grateful to him for raising such a wonderful daughter, my wife, who loved him and was devoted to him. And for the last few weeks, every time I would come home or come out of my room or upstairs, she was on the phone with him, video calling. And Marie Beth, too. They just both exhibited just incredible devotion and love for their father. And I often say, you get the love that you give. And he gave so much love, and he got it in return. There are a number of people, as I mentioned, who are here to offer words of tribute, and we'll begin with Rabbi Salangad.
When I was reflecting on the many hours that I had the great zechus to spend schmoozing and learning from Eurchie, one very important character trait that really captures everything that Eurchie was really stood out to me. The Gemara wonders, why was it that on Purim, the Jewish people had to go through such a terrible trauma of Haman? And the Gemara says, "Mipnei shenenu misudaso shel oso rasha," because when they went to the banquet that was made by Achashverosh, they enjoyed themselves. And because of that, Haman appeared on the scene. Now all of the commentators wonder, why would it be something so benign like enjoying themselves at the meal would cause such a terrible thing to occur? The Bali Musar explain that at that meal, what happened? There they were, somewhere they shouldn't have been, in exile, with all of this tremendous pomp and circumstance happening around them, and they enjoyed themselves. They didn't pay attention to the fact that all of the little things that were occurring there, what was going on around them, the kalim, the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash being used, the celebration in exile, small points that we sometimes will forget, were not a place for a Jew to enjoy themselves. And the Bali Musar say, when we miss the little details, what really defines us as being Jews, not the big stuff, then we lose our sensitivity to what it means to be a Jew. Because a Jew is defined by the small stuff. And because of that, only something big like Haman could have awakened them, because the small stuff no longer worked. And indeed, as human beings, we generally lose sight of the small details that define us as Jews, our values, our kindness, our history, the things that we do that no one notices, and only pay attention to that which is big. And in that way, we lose, in a sense, the sensitivity and the ehrlichkeit that makes a Jew. Eurchie was someone that didn't care about big. He only cared about small. Eurchie was someone, as Rabbi Gelman mentioned, and I thought of myself last night, that would literally give the shirt off his back for anybody. I personally saw the way he would open his wallet and give money in such a generous way to a person that needed to be able to afford a meal, needed to be able to afford rent, with no one ever knowing that he did so. How about preventing machlokes, disagreement? Eurchie wanted everybody to get along, and he didn't even say it, but you knew it. There was one evening in shul where he had a chiyuv for the Amud, and it happened to be someone else came that night that also did. Before Baruch Hu, Eurchie disappeared. No one could find him. And he only came in afterwards so that there wouldn't even be a discussion who should get the Amud, because he wanted the other person to do so, to have no conflict at all. Eurchie, when he would speak to me, would always say something nice. I mentioned to Rosemary yesterday that whenever Eurchie spoke to me, I felt like he was giving me a hug. His smile, his warmth, the genuine way he really meant everything that he said. And when he gave you a compliment, you knew it was real, because he wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. Eurchie was someone that loved learning Torah, loved davening, and when you saw him in a shir, he was smiling because he really enjoyed that which he was doing, something he transferred to his children and his grandchildren. And most of all, every time Eurchie had family around him, anytime he spoke about a grandchild, the joy that was in his eyes, the joy of someone that not only just enjoyed family and children, but understood what it meant as a Jew who had the history that he had, how special it was that a Jewish child should be there. How much simcha it meant that there was more Jews continuing the Mesorah that he carried from Europe here to America, here on this soil, and the joy it meant for him that it was continuing and that it was coming from him. Eurchie was someone that captured all the small things that make a Jew very big. And that's why a man, as he was, so modest, with so much humility, was a larger-than-life force in the lives of everyone that knew him. The Gemara tells us that the purpose of a eulogy is not just to give honor to the person that was deceased, but to, in a sense, inspire those that are here and left to continue what they left for us. We should all take within ourselves the incredible anivus, the incredible humility, the incredible modesty, the appreciation of sameach bechelko, satisfaction in one's lot, that Eurchie showed in every step that he took. When we do so, we in Mirz Hashem, along with his family, will continue the incredible legacy that he left for us.
In our community, we've been very blessed in the last few years. We were blessed to have being the next stop for Owen and Rosemary. And although it's true that everybody in the shul, Baruch Hashem, is now friends with Rosemary, it was a harder time for Owen. It was a time where his attendance at shul became more difficult. And we all hoped and we all wanted and wished to see him more. And in fact, still in my office, we still have his oxygen tank, hoping for that Shabbos that he would be able to come back and to join us in shul. To follow on with Rabbi Selengot's beautiful hesped, the Gemara tells us, quoting a pasuk, that Ki achaim yodim she'amusu. Those who are alive know that they will ultimately come to the end of their life. And I think sometimes Erwin knew more than we knew. I'm fine, I just can't breathe. And the Gemara makes a comment on that, and he says, Eilu tzadikim, this pasuk actually refers to those who are righteous, shebemisoson nikru'u chayim, that even in their passing, they are considered alive. How is a person alive after they pass? What does it mean that those who are tzadikim live on? We always talk about living on. What does that mean precisely? What are the mechanics? What's the calculus of that idea? Rav Kook, in his commentary on the Gemara, Ein Ayah, which he wrote 130 years ago in Zaimel, Lithuania, makes an observation, and he says it really depends what you live for. Because if you live for things, if you live for houses, cars, vacations, and items, all of those things perish. They all go away. Everything's finite. Everything is slowly degenerating and will disappear. And if you live for that, then your sense of existence is ultimately finite. But says Rav Kook, if a person lives for values, values don't die. If you live for things which are bigger, for ideas, for value systems, then ultimately your existence is connected to something which really truly is everlasting. And you know what he says? It was so remarkable when you read the words of Rav Kook on this Gemara. He says, you know what one of those values is? The first thing he says, he talks about ahava, love. He says love is something which doesn't die. And therefore a person who lives their life living for love, and that's a value in their life, then their personality, who they really are, doesn't die. Because what really matters, like Rabbi Senengat was saying a moment ago, really truly continues. Do we need to connect those dots even further to appreciate the special life of Mr. Owen Fisch, a person who lived for others, a person who loved for others, a person who, whenever you spoke to him, you felt that he truly appreciated you, just right now, for nothing else, no ulterior motives, just being here. The value of friendship, looking around this room, how many friends, how many beloved family and friends are in this room because of what he meant to them. Friendship mattered so much, and that never dies. May he continue to live. May he live on in us. May his lessons live on in us. And Be'ezus Hashem, may his friendship always live on in us. Yeh Zichra Baruch.
For those who don't know me, my name is Sam Gelman. I'm the oldest grandson on Gavi's side of the family. And when thinking about my grandfather, he's not someone who I would call a big sharer. Throughout my life, especially as I grew older, through college and beyond, I tried to extract small snapshots of my grandfather's storied past to try to see the world through his eyes and try to take something to pass along to the next generation. I was usually unsuccessful. Wave of the hand there, a yada yada here. He often seemed uninterested in going into details of his past and would quickly change the subject to something more immediate. My job, my relationships, my flight schedule, whatever was on his mind. But as it so happens, this past summer I was staying with my grandparents, and for whatever reason I was able to get him talking. We were sitting outside his porch, looking onto the beautiful plaza pool, and he told me two stories, similar. One about the time when he met the Rebbe, and one about the time when he met the Satmar Rebbe. Despite having personal audiences with these historical figures, he didn't remember much from these incidents, these meetings, including what either rabbi really said to him. Now, the rational side of me attributes this to lost memories of age. He was very young when these meetings happened, so it makes sense that he would not remember exactly what the rabbi said. He lived a full life since then, so it made sense. But I think that these significantly insignificant stories to my grandfather actually say a lot about how he saw the world. These types of grand moments, stories that we think that we would pass on to showcase, family connection and greatness, and a cool anecdote to pass along. They weren't central to him, because he didn't need to look back to what had happened before, because everything he needed was right in front of him. As everyone who spoke so far, and as you'll hear in later speeches, the most important thing to my grandfather was family. We saw it in his longing for his mother Olga and his sister Helen, who passed many years ago, in his commitment to my Savta, in his love for his daughters, and his absolute devotion to his many grandchildren. And this dedication to family didn't just lie in the immediate family. He was beloved and loved his extended family as well. He showed up for them, whether weddings to yahrzeits, he was always there for them in the same way that he was there for us. So yeah, my grandfather wasn't the biggest sharer when it came to those types of stories, but when it came to sharing himself with those that meant the most to him, his presence, his smile, his laugh, he was as generous as they can come. This is the lesson that I take from him as I say goodbye. The part of him that will be passed to the next generation by his children and grandchildren. So thank you, Zadie. Thank you for forgetting what the Rebbe said, so I could focus on what you were saying to me. I miss you, and I love you.
איש יהודי היה בשושן הבירה, ושמו Mordechai, ben Yair, ben Shimi, ben Kish, ish Yemini. In the metropolis of Shushan lived a Jew by the name of Mordechai, son of Yair, son of Shimi, son of Kish, a Binyamite. The Meforshim ask, if Mordechai was really from the tribe of Binyamin, why does it identify him as a Yehudi? Presumably the term Yehudi just means that he is genetically from the tribe of Yehuda. And how can he be both from the tribe of Yehuda and the tribe of Binyamin? I think the answer is obvious. The term Yehudi is not a merely genetic term. It became a term that identifies everyone in Klal Yisrael. This is how the term is used today. The word Jew, from Judean, means Yehudi, and it refers to every individual of Klal Yisrael. This trait of being Yehuda-like, Yehuda, whose very name, from the word Hodeh, means to thank Hashem, became the identifying feature of Klal Yisrael. To be a Jew, quite literally, means to be thankful to Hashem. My Ish Yehudi Ushmo Mordechai, Mordechai ben Eliakim Getzel, my Zaidi, was a true Ish Yehudi. He was born into a very difficult life, going through the Shoah, never knowing his father, coming to America from Hungary on a boat as a young child. I'd like to share 3 ways that my Zaidi was a true Ish Yehudi. First, he had a deep, natural sense of Yiddishkeit and Jewish values. At great personal sacrifice, at a time when it was not at all a given, he sent both of his daughters, my mom and aunt, to yeshiva day school and to study Torah for a year in Eretz Yisrael. Even in Shoshana Bira, the secular metropolis of New York, he stayed true and firm to establishing a family committed to Yiddishkeit. That decision impacted generations and will affect generations to come. Second, he took none of the blessings in his life for granted. At every single simcha, he gave the same speech. I'm not going to go into detail right now. I know other speakers will talk about it. But I give it to say that at every single simcha, he expressed that the fact that he was at his daughter's wedding, or at that fact that he got to go to 4 of his grandchildren's weddings and walk down the aisle, be at their Sheva Brachas, was not something that he ever took for granted, and something that he constantly and publicly thanked Hashem for. Third, my Zaidi had a deep, deep love for his family. There's an idea of emunah pshuta, a pure and uncomplicated faith in Hashem. It's not emunah that comes as the result of philosophical inquiry or analysis. For emunah pshuta, the source of its faith is faith itself. Although on the surface it may look simple, that belies the depth of feeling below. My Zaidi had what I would call an ahava pshuta, a pure and uncomplicated love for his family and his fellow Jew. It wasn't a love that came about from a sociological inquiry. Does this person look like me? Practice Judaism the same way as me? None of that. The source of his love for others and his family was his deep appreciation for them in and of themselves. Anyone who met him even once knows his charm, his sweetness, his warmth. Although on the surface this love may have looked simple, I felt the depths of feeling and sincerity below. He especially showered this love in his family. He knew that he couldn't take any relationship for granted, and that no person should be taken for granted. This ahava pshuta stemmed, I think, again, from his deep gratitude to Hashem for each and every bracha in his life. My Zaidi had a deep intuitive sense of what it meant to be an Ish Yehudi, committed to continuing Yiddishkeit, always thankful to Hashem, and seeing each Yehudi as a reason enough to radiate love and thanks. Zaidi, I love you, I miss you, and you mean so much to me. Yeh zichro baruch. I'm now going to call Moshe Rosenthal on the phone from Israel. Yes.
In the Megillah, when Bigson and Seresh are plotting to kill King Achashverosh, Mordechai overhears them and informs Esther about their plan. The pasuk says, "Vayivodah hadavar Mordechai," and the matter became known to Mordechai. Why does the pasuk say Vayivodah and it became known, and not just Vayishma, and he heard? A little later in the Megillah, after Haman decrees the annihilation of the Jewish people, the pasuk tells of Mordechai's reaction. Mordechai yoda es kol asher na'asa. And Mordechai knew all that had happened. Again, why does the Megillah say Yada? He knew, and not Shama. He heard. Throughout my life, I've noticed that Zadie has always been so happy at family gatherings. Whether it be weddings, Sheva Brachos, Bar Bat Mitzvahs, Chagim, Hanukkah parties, Pesach 2022 in Atlantic City, or just a classic traditions dinner. I've always noticed a special enjoyment Zadie received from these family events, a certain nachas he shept. Whenever Zadie spoke at a family simcha, on the rare occasion that he actually did, he'd often say something about having the whole family together and how special it was to witness the continuing on of the family, of our Masorah. I always heard this message, but I never truly understood it. However, as I thought over these two psukim from the Megillah, along with some memories of Zadie, I started to see what was behind the word usage of Yediyah, knowing, instead of Shemiah, hearing. What seems to me is that to know is not just to understand facts or complex ideas, but it's also, and more importantly, to internalize them and to live by them. Zadie taught me a lot, though not only through concepts, through the stories of his life he recalled, and through his actions by which he lived his life. I learned what was important to him and how it was meaningful. He taught me about the importance of family, not only through defining how to be a mensch, but by demonstrating how to act as a mensch. Countless times from my homeschool all the way through my high school years, did Zadie selflessly help out to babysit, drive carpool, come and hang out, spoil me to dinner, and so on and so forth. He lived a life of knowing, sensing the importance of every moment and living by it accordingly. Likewise, Mordechai in the Megillah not only heard the assassination planned by Bigson and Seresh, but knew, was aware, sensed the real threat and took action to nullify it. Mordechai also did not just hear the Gezerah against the Jews and respond passively. No, he knew, he took it to heart, he sensed the true urgency of the situation, and right away initiated the true process. During my last pre-Shabbos call with Zadie this past Friday, I brought up the topic of Purim. I told him about everything planned for me in yeshiva and how I could celebrate Shushan Purim. I then asked him what would go on by him, and Zadie smiled as he told me the family planned to get together at his apartment for the Suda. However, right before he told me about Purim, he said a line which seemed at the time mundane, but will stick with me forever. He said something along the lines of, "I'm not thinking about Purim yet. I'm just taking it day by day, one day at a time." What a profound sense of Yediyah Zadie had. Love you.
I met Eurchie in 1966, which is a long time ago. I was a very little person. I was 9 or 10 years old at the time. And I had two much older sisters than me, and I had parents, thank God. And it was explained to me that Rosemary was getting engaged, and that was like in June-ish, and then there'd be a wedding in January of 1967. And I was very, very excited that I was going to have, they explained to me, you're going to have a brother-in-law. I go, a brother? I go, they said, no, it's like a brother, but, he's going to be closely related. And I always took a head count of our family, and there was always 5. And now there was going to be a 6th person, and I was very, very excited. So leading up to the wedding, which after that date was the most exciting day of my life, their wedding, during their engagement, I got to know Eurchie, and I would spend some time in his apartment in Crown Heights. And I was into sports, and I was into football, and Eurchie very patiently explained to me the rules of football. I watched it, but I didn't understand it, what a 1st and 10 was a 2nd and 8 was. And he explained to me, you have to get 10 yards to get a first down. I go, that's great. And he said, you got to get many first downs to get into a touchdown situation. And he did it with patience. Another thing is that we didn't have a car, and Eurchie drove, and when they got married and they had kids, etc., he drove my parents everywhere. I mean, me and my parents everywhere. He never once complained to them. He never once turned to Rosemary and goes, "I can't believe I have to do this." He just did it, and that's the theme of him being always there. One of the benefits as a little person was I had another place to go other than staying in my own home in Brighton Beach, and that was to go to their house or apartment on Shabbos. And first they lived on Beach 117th Street in Bell Harbor, and then they moved to Beach 124th Street. And the great thing about me piggybacking on that is that I have a lot of connectivity with a lot of people here that are here today that I've known for 50 plus years, if not longer. And one other place is that those summers back then in the mid '60s, Rosemary and Eurchie would work at places like glorious place, the Empire Hotel or the Ehrenreich Hotel, and to have been there was it was better than sleepaway camp. Now that I reflect back, and again, knowing a lot of you out there from those kind of connections, Eurchie was a waiter, Rosemary was a counselor in the day camp, and those connections stay till today. Again, Eurchie was always there for us. He even said to me at the end of my wedding, he goes, Moshe, I love you. I don't know if he said it to anyone else, but he said it to me. And again, being always there and for his family, and he had this gigantic family that I got to meet at his wedding. They were so gigantic. The wedding was overwhelming with cousins that were like hovering over the chuppah. And we never experienced like that. But nonetheless, that's all I have to say. And as everyone else, just a man's man, and I'm going to miss him, and he was a great guy. And I will miss you, Eurchie.
Every Jew can be conceived as a Sefer Torah. The Torah does not record every story that happened to the Avos and Imahos. It just has a few curated events which is filled with powerful lessons which are there to animate the Jewish people forever. So too, a person's life, a person's Sefer Torah has a few stories that really reflect what their essence is, what they're all about. I want to share just two stories today. As always was reflected, one of the things that struck me, like every Zaidi, of course, Sheps Nachas at a Simcha, that's what it is to be a Zaidi. But my father-in-law, what I call Dad said the following phrase at the Simcha: I feel so blessed in my life. What did I do to deserve this? He looked at his wonderful daughters, his amazing sons-in-law, their rabbinic homes, and their 11 outstanding grandchildren and their wives as being beyond what he deserved. He felt a deep sense of Hakaras Hatov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He said this repeatedly. Now, when people have a good situation in their lives, typically they ascribe it to their special genius or their outstanding greatness. Dad was smart, but he was humble. He looked at life blessings, such as grandchildren, as pure, undeserved kindness. The pasuk in Tehillim that we say in the Hallel, Ki gavar aleinu chazdo ve'emes Hashem lolam haluka. For Hashem has overwhelmed us with kindness. And the truth of Hashem is forever, haluka. It is not merely that Hashem has granted mercy and kindness to the Jewish people, but they've been overwhelmed by it. Dad felt overwhelmed by all the good that he had in his life. Now, to appreciate where this philosophical orientation came from, we need to walk back to one of the darkest chapters of Jewish history. The systematic murder of the Hungarian Jewish community in the Holocaust. Until 1944, the anti-Semitic Hungarian government of Miklos Horthy refused to succumb to Hitler's pressure to hand over all the Jews. Now get this, he's an anti-Semite. He's oppressing the Jews, but he did not want to go as far as Hitler, and he resisted for many years until he got the offer. You can not hand over the Jews, or we're going to invade your country. So in March 1944, the Nazis invaded Hungary and installed a pro-Nazi government. In May and June 1944, in 8 weeks, the Nazis deported to Auschwitz 424,000 Jews, most of which who did not survive. 8 weeks. It was one of the quickest genocides that happened in the Holocaust to the Hungarian Jewish community. By less than a year later, the end of the war, 565,000 Hungarian Jews were murdered. 70% of the entire Hungarian Jewish community. So from that perspective, how did little Eurchie survive? His father, Eliakim Getzel, Hashem Yikom Es Damo, was drafted into the Hungarian army and ultimately found his end in Auschwitz. Born in March 1942, Eurchie never really knew his father. His mother, Olga, of blessed memory, took care of Eurchie and his little sister, Helen. But unfortunately, she too was taken into multiple concentration camps. How she survived, I simply don't know. The average survival rate of a person going to Auschwitz was roughly 3 weeks. I think she went to 4 or 5 camps. The bracha in the family was his Aunt Ilanka, who was young, beautiful, and was able to pass herself off as a non-Jew with her false papers. She adopted little Eurchie and little Helen. And through a series of events which we don't have all the information, which included a hiding in a convent and other treacherous circumstances, without her efforts, we would not be here today. Ilanka Berger was the Esther Hamalka of our family. She was a young woman and had to risk her life to save Jewish children. Ultimately, Olga miraculously survived the war and was reunited with her sister Ilanka and the children. Eurchie's father's many brothers and sisters and their children survived, as did his grandfather. And they all relocated to New York after the war. So one thing is very clear. Once you're a child survivor of the Holocaust, you do not take absolutely anything for granted. Any chesed is free chesed. He felt it. As we already heard already, it was in his DNA. Last year, we had the tremendous bracha to gather for Pesach, the whole family. And I want to just depict a story. He's my father-in-law, is sitting there at the end of the table with all of his children, his grandchildren, and there's Divrei Torah. It's a very animated. If you know the Gelman and Rosenthal family, I want to read the word animated. You can understand what that means. And there's conversations, and he is just laying back as he normally does, and he is just taking it all in. And just to say the pasuk, just to rephrase it, Ki gavar aleini chazdo. Hashem has overwhelmed me with kindness. From a little boy who ran away from the Nazis to be blessed with 11 grandchildren was simply unbelievable to him. He never took it for granted. I also have Hakar Satov to be Erwin's son-in-law for the last 32 years. I found him to be what I would call the model father-in-law. He was always kind, he was always generous, and he was always very understanding. He never used his role as father-in-law to push or enforce his agenda. He was very, very tolerant. We were different, yet we got along. He cherished family unity over family uniformity. I must publicly express my Hakar Satov to my Ishes Chayil Marie, who together with her sister Gabi spent so much time on a daily basis to ensure that Dad had the best quality of life during his illness during these last years. Your excellent power of executive functioning, honey, really helped Mom and Dad navigate this very challenging and debilitating disease. He loved you and really appreciate what you're doing for him, even if it was very hard for him to accept what was the changes that were happening to him. You were blessed to have a father who loved you so, so much, and we were blessed to have such a wonderful Zaidi. Yehi Zichro Baruch.
In thinking about my father, I'm reminded of one of the last scenes from one of my favorite films called Big Fish. At the end of the movie, while the main character, the father, is dying, his son sits by his bedside and describes for him the farewell that he envisions for him. Here are the last few lines. The son says, "As we get close to the river, people are shouting, 'He's here, he's here.' And we see that everybody is already there. And I mean everybody. It's unbelievable." And then his father whispers, "It's the story of my life." The son continues, "And the strange thing, there's not a sad face to be found. Everyone is just so glad to see you and send you off right. And you become what you always have been, a very big fish. And that's how it happens." And his father replies, "Exactly." Yesterday, as I sat with my father in the hospital, I thought about this scene, not only because my father was known to some of his friends as Fisch, but because I had my own vision of my father's exit from this world, the people who'll be waiting in the next world and shouting, "He's here, he's here." His father, Eliakim Getzel, will be waiting to greet his little boy and be so proud of the man he had become. The three musketeers, my father, my Aunt Helen, and my Bobby Olga, would be reunited again. Uncle Gino and Libby would run out in the grass and greet him in the moonlight bungalow colony of Shemayim. Auntie Lanka would serve stuffed cabbage, and his friend Shopsy would be taking out some fresh pizza. His cousin Jay would be ready to talk some business. Tante Malki, Uncle Hershu would discuss how the move from Bell Harbor had gone. My father-in-law, Marty Gelman, would be smirking, and they would joke how now my mother and my mother-in-law would have no buffers when they started talking. And his good friend Diane Hoff would be waiting to give him a huge hug and schmooze about the kids and the grandchildren. And then there are all the people here who would want to say goodbye and who will truly miss my father. All of his many, many cousins, other relatives, friends from his Brooklyn days, friends from his business days, and even my own friends from my Flatbush days and from his visits to Houston. Everyone who met my father loved him, He would literally say, "Your father, I love him." He had this chen about him, a sweetness, and a desire to not upset anyone. When he met someone he knew, he would brighten up with a big hello, and you would literally feel the authenticity of his response, that he was truly, truly happy to see you. My father did not talk a lot about his childhood and his young adult life to me, but there were a few select stories that he would tell me and would repeat as he aged. How he was valedictorian of Lubavitch Yeshiva in 8th grade and had a private meeting with the Rebbe before his bar mitzvah, and how he was sad when his Rebbe at Tells took away his radio and told him baseball was pasnished. When I started Yeshiva Flatbush in middle school and I used his Sfarim for my Judaic classes, I would find his notes from his yeshiva days written in them. And these experiences gave me a small glimpse of the young Eurchie. By the way, as his grandchildren and daughters know, in those Sfarim, we would also sometimes find these wads of cash. As all the Gelman and Rosenthal grandchildren know, Zadie always had cash in his pockets, and he would just peel off some bills to give you. There was never any specific occasion. He would just be low-key about it. As you were leaving from a visit or you were sitting next to him at the table, he would just kind of slyly come over. And the next thing you know, you'd have some money in your hands. In his older years, as we celebrated together grandchildren and then B'nai Mitzvot and then weddings, my father would sometimes speak at these events. And I know we've heard this, and this seems to be a running theme. Thank you, Z, for reading my speech ahead of time. And he had this one speech where he would say publicly this one theme of Hakarat HaTov. Yesterday, as I waited for my flight from Denver to New York, I watched a few short videos of my dad. And they were all alike, all the speeches. And here is a little bit of a transcript. He would say, "Most of all, I want to thank the Ribono Shel Olam for bringing Mekayim all my wishes." And he would say, and I know I've repeated this, and when you get married and you're young, you have children, and I had girls, and I would say, if I only lived long enough to see my girls get married, that's all I wanted. And Baruch Hashem, I was granted that wish. And then they had children, and then I asked the Ribono Shel Olam if I only could live long enough to see them get married. And the Ribono Shel Olam has been very good to me, and he was Mekayim whatever I asked for. And he said, this was amazing to see a grandchild get married, something when I was younger I never would have dreamed. You get to be a chazer. The more he gives you, the more you want. But what more can I want? And I want to thank the Ribono Shel Olam for letting me have all this nachas. Now, this specific speech he just gave at Shmuel and Miriam's Shabbat Brachas, but he would say something like this over and over again, no matter what the occasion. I thank my dad for teaching me that lesson, to be grateful for what is in front of me, and to always try and see the good in what I have. In an article by Elisha Wiesel about his father, Eli Wiesel, he writes that as his father came closer to his end, he would often ask Eli Wiesel, right, what he could do for him, what could he do for his father? And smiling, his father would hold his hand, look into his eyes, and say, just be. Elisha Wiesel also remembers a Hasidic story of the Baal Shem Tov, which he had learned from his father. The Baal Shem Tov was once approached by a Hasid, complaining about his troubles with his child. And the Rebbe's surprising answer was, just love your child more. As a father and a grandfather, my father sent us that message. Be who you want to be, and I'll love you. And whatever you choose, I'll just love you more. Just be. You could feel his acceptance and his pride in every encounter he had with us. I will miss my father terribly. Our daily FaceTime calls, sometimes a few times a day, when we would often talk about Houston weather, then we shifted now to Denver weather. He would ask me about my kids and tell me how each one was great in his or her own way. Ellie with his sports podcast, Ami with politics, how Ben could fit in everywhere, how Lily, or as he called her always, Tikva Leah, was so talented, and how Sam and Denna were just so perfect together. I will follow his lead and continue to love my children and then just love them more. I will let them each just be and be proud of them. I am so grateful for all the years I had with my father, although, of course, right now I don't feel like those were enough. And I asked Mechila publicly from him here if there were times when I did not treat him with the kavod that he always deserved. Yehei zichro baruch.
Hey, thank you everyone for coming. Actually sort of know almost everybody in this room, which is sort of amazing. I was really happy to be assigned last because I seem to have learned a lot of things from my father. I'll speak a few details, but one of the things is that when someone tells you, oh, you're going to speak at this event coming up, the response that you should give is, nah, I don't know if I'm going to speak, which is what I said yesterday. And then my father, when he finally did decide to speak, he just got up and spoke, you know. So, and when you're speaking from the heart, you don't always need it to be written out. Although, under the guidance of my very organized rabbinic husband, he suggested I write a few things down, just in case I decided to speak. And I'm going to try not to repeat the things that were said, because they were all said so beautifully, although many of the things I was thinking were said by the first three rabbis. I didn't see their speeches before I saw the others, so. Ezehu Ashir Hasameach Bechalko. And my father was very happy with his chelek, and he was a very happy person. When a person is happy, like my father, like you've heard, it exudes. That was the happiness in his face, in his smile, and that's why we felt that hug that you talked about, and you felt that he really loved you. You can't love others unless you love yourself, unless you're really a happy person. Other people aren't going to feel happy from you. You can't be contagious unless you have it. And he was sameach, and he was sameach bechalko. And I'll try to just, be quick and only add the new things. But a person's chelek is two parts. You have your nature, nurture. And a lot of my father's chelek, like we heard, were not things that he chose. It's like life happened to him. And then he had to respond. Like in life, we can only be responsible for how we respond to our own situations. So what parts of his chelek, what was his chelek that he was given? He wasn't chosen. So you've heard, he didn't choose to be a child survivor. He didn't choose to be an orphan without a father. He didn't choose to only have one sibling. He didn't choose to be an immigrant. But he also did not choose to have 100 or more first cousins. Or, over 15 aunts and uncles, and once they married, additional. He didn't choose that. That was his chelek. It's great. He didn't really choose his education like our kids might now choose, like what school, where do I want to be? Like, you're here, you're going, this is where you're going, especially not with the father, but the uncles, the aunts. But he didn't really have a choice for the path he was put on. Later in life, he didn't have a choice for his job. He wasn't trained. What do? You go to mishpacha. I'm old, I'm getting married, I need to make money. Okay, you have 100 first cousins and aunts and uncles. Who's going to take care of Eurchie? Who's going to give him a job? Who's going to train him? It wasn't a choice. People helped. And they went with them, and they loved him, and they made sure he had skills, and he made money, and he had options of different relatives who were going to help him out. He wasn't alone. But he didn't choose it. It was his chelek. It was given to him. He also didn't really, I don't really think they chose to live in Bell Harbor. I think that was a part of that his chelek was that Malki and Ari were helping him, and they were giving him a job in Bell Harbor, and there was other aunts and uncles in Bell Harbor. If they would have taken the job with Chai, he would have ended up in California. So Bell Harbor happened, but I don't think it was like a chelek, where should we live? Where should we buy a house? It was his chelek to be there. It wasn't his chelek not to have sons. It's sort of nice to have a son. I always felt at some point maybe, but we never felt too bad he doesn't have a son to take to a ball game, because he had Ari and Getzi. And Ari, Getzi, and Chani were like his other kids. So you never felt Dad doesn't have sons. He had them. And he had Mati and Zalmi, and he has his cousins that were younger, like brothers and sons. And it was his chelek. He didn't choose that, but it was what he had. And obviously he didn't choose to be in Manhattan during 9/11 and breathing all those fumes for the months afterwards, and didn't choose to. ends his, like Rabbi Trump said, I'm very healthy, I just can't breathe. He didn't choose that. That happened to him. And that was his chelek. That was the chelek that he was given. And but he was sameach, because he chose to take his chelek and be sameach with it. And some of the things I said in his chelek are tragedies, and some of them are beautiful things that just the way life worked, and he was in a good situation that helped him. And he really was so happy about how things were turning out. And that inner happiness gave him the happiness to hug and to smile and to make everyone else around him feel protected. Again, words that came up before. Like one of the rabbis had said, the purpose of the Levaya, we could tell you lots and lots of stories about my dad, and I think mostly people have been keeping with the deeper themes, which is really appropriate. But really, being the last speaker, like was said before, the purpose is that when that everyone here is remembering my father, or maybe you didn't know him and maybe you just know me, or maybe you just know Gabi or some of us. But he was on this world and he's not here now, but he is still here, as was said. And you should come away from today thinking, improving yourselves, trying to be more like some of the qualities he had, so that you can be a better person, and ultimately you're making the world a better place. You're Mekadesh Hashem in the world, which is part of his purpose, to recognize Hashem. And if we come away, and all of you here come away, and you tell these things to other people who are not here, that he is alive. That was his purpose, and we learned from him. And that is the purpose of the speeches. So with that, I'm going to end not yet, almost end, but I'm going to end with, what did we learn from him? And I was thinking about that, like, what did we learn from him? What should I tell everybody? And then I realized that, like I'm him. Like, so much of me is him. I could just tell you about myself, and then you'll know what my father was. So I'm going to say a couple of things about what I learned from him. And if you know me, you'll know that this is sort of me. But I learned it from him, and other people who know him learned it from him, or you can learn it from him, or by extension, you can learn from me or from Gabi or from anyone here, because we are who we are a lot because of him. Small things, because we need to smile, it's almost Purim, and Daddy would totally want small things and funny things too here. So we learned we should always carry cash, preferably in a rubber band. We learned always offer to pay for cash. We learned that when you need something, first look to family. There is probably someone in the family who has that, knows that, does that business, and you will get VIP treatment. Never just like go out and buy or do. Go to family, call someone. You don't know, call Esty. She knows which person knows this, who knows that. Call Yitzi. There's enough family around. You don't need to go to a stranger. That's what you do. And my kids laugh, but that's what we do. That's what we learn. Similarly, we learned from my father, it's really who you know. It's true, you got to know a lot, but it's more who you know than what you know. So make sure you know a lot of people, and make sure you know a lot of good people. My father had a few catchphrases. One of them was, it's just money. Money was so not important. It was just it's just money. And he didn't have a lot of money. We were never rich growing up in Bell Harbor. None of us rich now. We always had enough. Even in Bell Harbor, as a kid, you don't notice what's going on in your family. We never felt poor. We never felt rich. We just we were happy. We had what we needed. And even as an adult, I see different families, how they interact with money. I see in our own family, there's always some extended fish, what I'm talking about sometimes. But, yeah, honey. But, it's I see other people, they borrow money from the parents pay them back. Pay back your parents? Money. His attitude is, your money, my money, it's all the same. There's no difference. Even close friends, it's just, that's an important thing. It's all together, and it's all just money. You can care about stuff. Stuff's really not important at all. And that's part of the things that I learned. We also learned other parts of me that are from him, and someone used it, but yeah, I'm good at executive functioning, and that comes from him. I got that gene. We can organize, we can plan. Ask him, years ago, how do you get to this? He takes the maps, he looks, he plans. There's certain DNA genetic thing, and he could do that. I can do that. It's a good skill. He makes plans, he takes care of things. Never panic, never like, emotion. No, let's do it, let's take care of it. Another catchphrase that I use a lot that he taught me, I'm still not perfected it yet, because I'm a little bit of a planner and a worrier, is he says, don't worry about what didn't happen yet. Biggest lesson, don't worry about what could have, what might. He always say to me, if it happens, then you'll worry about it. Don't worry about it now. Such an important lesson, such a hard thing. And so many times I grab my inner daddy to try and hold myself back. Like, don't waste my worry. Like, it didn't happen, it might not happen. Look around, good things are happening. Be in your moment and don't worry yet. And if something happens, you'll deal with it. Such an important thing. I learned from my father, it's really important to go to every simcha that you can. You're invited, you should go. It's important to wake up early and drive to New Jersey and go to someone's bris, or your third cousin's grandchild. Yes, we can't always do that, but the value is there. It's an important thing to aim for. You share simchas. We don't just come to cemeteries. Obviously, I learned from my father to love Eretz Yisrael. He was such a Zionist. Him and my mom, we would always grow up and we'd hear like all the Israeli songs, Yoram Ga'on and this and that. And I remember that like as a child, we lived during the time when there was Antebi, and I remember that my father explained to me that Hashem was doing a miracle. He didn't say about, Yoni Natai. I remember being a kid thinking like, oh my God, there's Hanukkah and there's a miracle and there's Purim and there's Antebi. Like the way it was it was equal. It was a nace. And that was the impression that as a child we were given. Like, here's a real nace from Hashem and it's happening now, and it was like unbelievable. And that's how he saw things. He saw, and thank you for this, Purim theme, Daddy. You made it so easy for us. But like, he saw the Hester Pine. He saw the Nes Nistar. He didn't have to see the big miracles. He saw Hashem behind the scenes, and he knew he was here in those hidden moments. He saw Hashem, and that's what I learned. That was a big thing, to see the Nes Nistar. Where is Hashem now? He's there. I learned it from being a little girl. My dad had a great sense of humor, always made people smile and laugh. I try to do that. My kids think I'm not so funny. But he was smiley. Like Abby said, all my friends, oh, I love your dad. They just loved coming and hanging over with him, and just, they felt coming for Shabbos or hanging out, or, how's your dad? Even yesterday in the last moments, I was calling some of my close friends who just wanted to be there. I had a few friends who spoke to him in the phone because they loved him, even from across the world. We also learned from my father that, again, this is a little not timely in 2023, but in earlier days, we learned from my father, you never let someone take a taxi to or from an airport. It's just not done. It's just not done. Now, we have some cousins here who have already been learning and doing it. You go, you pick them up, you drive them up. You don't take a driver, you don't take a thing. So lately, because Ubers are so convenient and easy, he's sort of like, it was okay if someone took an Uber, and he was accepting that things have changed a little bit. But the value is you go and you do. You certain things, people shouldn't be alone. You shouldn't get off an airport and go with a stranger in a taxi. That extra helping, that extra thinking. My father taught us to not draw attention to yourself, to just do and stay behind the scenes. And I remember being a little girl, in Bell Harbor, they would have the appeals, and they would announce the categories. Here's the $1,000 people, and they would list, and they would go, I guess, lower to higher, right? So they would give people a chance to raise their donations. And I remember, like, I rarely heard our name mentioned. I always felt a little like embarrassed, like some of you guys' names were mentioned sitting here. And I was like, And then I once said something, and my mom said, well, when Rabbi Reiner says anonymous at some of the levels, like, that's your dad. One of those is him. And, wow, that was such a That was so big. That was such a learning lesson as a little girl. Like so many lessons that I have now when I look back. Like I learned them when I was young from these little events, and it became ingrained in me, that type of midos. I learned from my father to be very present in your children's lives. Nowadays people working in Parnassa, I don't know. I remember my father was always around. He worked and he came home. He came to all our events. He drove us carpool. He drove us this. He came to I learned you have to go to every kid's basketball game and football game and softball game. And if you yourself can't go, you make sure the Zadie's there. But somebody's there the whole time. And that's part of me. That's part of who I am and how I lead my life. And it's because of what my father did. He didn't outsource his parenting. He taught us to ride bikes. He taught us to drive cars. He taught us to, be financially sound. He did his own taxes. Last year, he couldn't do his taxes for the first time. It killed him to pay someone to do your taxes. Like, he couldn't. And the plan was that this year, Eliyahu was going to take care of it, because he would let Eliyahu do it. But to pay someone to something, you got to do yourself. You take care of your own. You teach your kid to drive. You teach your kid to ride a bike. You build your own sukkah. First sukkah we ever had from Home Depot with nails in the backyard. So proud. I remember being a little girl, so proud. My dad's building a sukkah. We're hammering the nails together. Not even sons, just me and Gabi, or maybe she was little. Remember, he's giving me the hammer. Somehow we got that sukkah up. And it was amazing. I was so proud. And that taught me, you go and you do. You do it yourself. And lastly, again, the last thing that we really learned from him, that I learned from him, which is, if you know me, this is part of me, and this is something that I'm going to really, really promise, and I promised him in the last moments, this is the biggest, or one of the biggest lessons that I saw and that we all saw, and everyone here probably knows, and I'm going to do this for you and be better at it. But my father showed us what it is to love your sister more than anyone in the world. And I'm going to do that, too. So I also only have one sister. And I know how to do it the right way because I saw what he did. And my father took care of his mother to a crazy degree that everyone knows. And she was alone. And I saw what he did. And I'm going to learn from that. And I promise, I watched and I saw, and I'm going to take care of Mommy, because she's alone now too, because my father taught me the right way to do it. And who I am and how I'm making my life and how I'm choosing to be, so much of it. I mean, there's things that just happened in life and, but so much of it, when I think, is because he taught me and he modeled. And that's why I'm me. And that's why I'm doing the things I do. And those last two things, the loving your sister and the taking care of your mommy, I'm gonna do those to the best, and I'm gonna try harder to do those even better. And I hope that everybody here takes the words that you've heard and internalizes them, and find your inner Eurchie and be better, and Mekadesh Hashem, and he would be so proud of us here and proud of us continuing his values, because that's what he wanted. He didn't want sichsach, just it should be calm and peaceful, and we should all use those lessons to in the future to be better and Mekadesh Hashem. Yehi zichro baruch.
This is last minute, and I just put it together sitting here. because I didn't want everyone to only know one part of Eurchie. You all know that I consider this a very bad dream, and I'm going to snap my skin, and then it's going to wake up, and he'll be around. Eurchie and I met when I was 17, working in Ehrenreichs, like my brother said. A lot of it is going to be repetitive, and he was working at the bigger hotel called Empire. That one had a mikvah on the premises, and wow, I was really impressed, and they had a casino. Okay. Then I said to myself, I don't want to work at this little Everreich anymore, to which my mother took my brother at 3 to Empire Hotel to make sure that I was hanging out with the right type young men who were working there, because here I am at this big hotel, fancy hotel. We had a 9-month engagement. We met at the Empire Hotel, and we made our wedding arrangements, and like my children have said, I never met somebody who had at least 50 cousins, and he and Jay Amsel, who is up there hugging him, and together they're all watching us. He, Jay, Helen, and there's one more, I think California, they were the oldest. So here goes the wedding list. I have whatever. We're going to have a very big wedding, 250 people. We imitated our friends, Moish and Paula, whatever they did. I said, I want the same. He said, whatever you want. The best husband, young men, is whatever you want. So I said, okay, but I don't want anyone under 12. I don't care who that cousin is to you, the aunt, I'll take, but I don't want cousins under 12. And again, because he was a hidden child of this Holocaust, and he had no father, one by one, every tante invited us for dinner to meet me, give us a big meat meal, and I walked out. It was great. I only came from, my father had one brother, and my mother had one brother. So this was, and he didn't have children. So this was wonderful to me, all these cousins, but I didn't want anyone under 12 at the wedding. He said, fine. Okay. Yeah, the best husband, just whatever you want. Do you want the room to be green or pink? Whatever you want. Do you want to go with the car? Whatever you want. That's the best. He went off after we married and then the girls came, he said to me, would you mind if I started going back to school at night, 4 nights a week and all day Sunday? I said, why? You didn't get a BA. I don't care about that. And I was in the middle of getting my master's. He says, because I want to do that. His mother looked at me afterwards and said, what did you do? I said, nothing. I don't care about degrees. I married Eurchie for Eurchie. He was smiling. He made me laugh. We had very good times. He introduced me to my first whiskey cocktail. I never went to a nightclub in my life. And we didn't go on a Saturday night. We went after night school, Brooklyn College. We'd meet. He'd take me home. I changed. And then we went out to nightclubs. I mean, I don't know how I did it, but we were young. Okay. Then we got married, fine. The girls came, and like Marie Beth said, he came home from work, and if it was daylight, he took them on the bike, taught them up and down the street, 124th Street, took each girl, learned how to ride a bike. Then, when they were old enough, he said, of course we'll do driving lessons, because I want my girls to drive so I know who's safe in the car. She'll be the driver. And they both passed on the first try, because Daddy went driving with them in the dark in Rockaway after a day of work. I said to the girl, Mary Beth was the first, what does he do because I was terrified. I learned at 30 and they're 16 to drive. Well, Daddy takes me in the car, he tells me how to start it, and then he turns around to the window and goes to sleep. So that's what Daddy did. Yes, he also taught them Hungarian songs. You started in with him and he would teach you, and he didn't teach you. He never used the word teach. He just sang them. And we looked at him and the girls picked them up. Okay, that was very, very, very nice. We always made a joke that when we get very, very old and like dementia and we're in a nursing home, he will look at me with that smile. I'll look at him back, and he'll talk to me in his native tongue, Hungarian, and I'll answer in my native tongue, French. And we both wouldn't know what he's saying. It doesn't matter because we're both in another world. Yeah. I also was going to mention about the great respect and physical. I mean, Helen was giving birth tomorrow. Her husband went to his Rebbe for Rosh Hashanah, and I'm going to go stay with her till she gives birth. I said, okay. I mean, the devotion to a sister like that. We went to Muribet's wedding. I think we picked them up on the way there. Maybe they came with a different cousin, lots and lots of cousins. Gave Helen and her husband and Olga lifts. But going home from the wedding, guess who drove them to their homes, different streets. We didn't go straight to Bell Harbor. We went to Brooklyn to drive them home from the weddings. We waved, I remember waving to Mary Beth and Penny, and they got in their limousine, and then the three of us went into back to wherever they lived. The devotion to a sister and a mother and his aunt, yes. Very, very good. Oh, and then my friend said to me, when I went to visit Marie Beth that Christmas, that Hanukkah in Yerushalayim, she was away for a year. I said, my friend went last summer to Israel for 4 weeks. How do you work with that if I would leave you for 4 weeks? He says, go. I said, are you sure? He says, yeah, there's a lot of kosher in Brooklyn. Don't worry about it. 5 towns has Brook. I can be fine. Not only did he encourage me to go, but when I went, he drove me to the airport, and at one point he was so embarrassed on the line. You know, you have a 3-hour line till you get the security. He said, you know what, don't talk to strangers. But I always do. I talk to anyone and everyone, and I tell them my life's history. But then I said to myself, I don't have to be like that. Let him be the car of service, drop me off at the airport, just put out the luggage, it's too heavy for me, and bye. And that's what we did. And I remember coming home that first summer in September, somebody from our shul approached me and said, Eurchie lets you go to Israel for 4 weeks alone? You leave him alone? And I said what my friend had said to me. What, there were no kosher restaurants in the city? And that was that. And he loved being alone for 4 weeks. He went to Mary Beth. He went to a friend. People in the neighborhood community, they invited him for a meal. And then there was Shabbatim. He wanted to be alone, which I understand also, because Monday to Friday, he was so busy chatting in business, in the fabric business, where also they adored him. Oh, charity, the tzedakah. Eurchie, how much should we give? Whatever you want. Eurchie, how much should we give? Eurchie, can we give this to a wedding gift? Yes, whatever you want. Whatever it is, whatever you want. Even down to money. So this is quite interesting. He had no ego. He had no ego. But he would sit at a wedding table. I've been to weddings where he didn't really appreciate everyone at the table. And unless someone spoke to him and initiated a conversation, he could sit at a 2-hour wedding and not say a word, 3-hour. He could be the whole dinner. That was it. Can we go home now? You know, he did his duty. Everyone speaks about his hugs and kisses. I know somebody who's sitting in the room now who has said to me more than once, I've never met anyone so in love with their grandchildren as this man. You know that every high school basketball game that anybody was in that we could drive to, we were there. He'd come home 5 o'clock and say, do you want to go to a game at 7? Where? Upstairs. Well, we went. And sometimes I went, I was just too tired from a day of work, but he went by himself. He adored. They could do no wrong. And he wanted to know everyone, whatever they're doing, with whom, how are they physically, what city, who's on a plane now, where are they going? It's like a mind-boggling that from Kinhara 11, I always say, now we got 15, because 15, because those 4 girls, women, are ours just as much as the husbands are. And they are, and that's how Eurchie talks about them and treats them. And that's it. I just want to say to Eurchie that I wasn't the perfect wife. He and I had many, many disagreements, I'll put it mildly. And even to the end, I used to say to him, don't you want to be at so-and-so's wedding? Do this, eat this, don't do this, don't walk there. Let's go outside. He did want to go outside for weeks. Rabbi Trump knows he was in shul the last time, Simchas Torah, a year ago. Whatever. And Purim, he was in shul. That was before Simchas Torah. So Simchas Torah was the last time, and he was so happy. Like I said, Eurchie, is it okay that I go to shul? And he said, yeah, go. believe me, the car. No, he was joking. He'd say, and the other day he said, "Where's my wallet?" I said, "What do you need your wallet for?" "I have to have money. I only have $7 on me." I said, "What are you buying?" "I have to have money." So I gave him more money. He had to have his wallet with him, with the rubber band around it, and always had to have money in it because you never know what's going to happen. And he did enjoy going to Costco. I took him 3 times on the scooter. He was so excited, up and down, and they were so kind. And it was very, very, very difficult. The last few was a very big challenge. But as I've said to friends of mine who know me like a sister, Hashem put him there for me to deal with the challenge, to show my children, grandchildren, that whatever Hashem gives you, you can handle. And I asked from Eurchie that he should be mechila me. I don't know that line that they were saying, for all the things I didn't do perfectly, and I should have been a better wife.
I know that nightclub thing was unexpected. Rabbi Schwab? I think he started with that, so.
Amnatseach Mizmor David. Ya'ancha Adonai b'yom tzara yisagevcha Hashem Elahei Yaakov. Yishlach ezrika mikodesh u'mitzion yisadeka. Yizkor kol minchaisecha v'lascha yidashna sela. Yitein lecha chilvavecha v'chol asascha yimalei. Neranana b'shuasecha v'shem Eloheinu nidgol. Yimalei Adonai kol mishalasecha. Ata yadati ki yoshi Adonai mishicho Yaneu mishmei kadsho bigvaros yesha yamino Eila varecha ve'eila vasusim V'anachnu b'shem Adonai Eloheinu nazkir Hey makaru v'nafalu V'anachnu kamnu v'nisodad Adonai Yoshia melech hanenu v'yom kareinu.
I want to thank everyone for coming. We're going to escort the Aron out of the building now. We're going to ask the grandchildren to come forward to act as pallbearers. And as you know, the burial is going to be taking place tomorrow, sometime late morning, early afternoon in Israel. And for those who want to follow the live stream of that, we'll send out more information about the specific timing. Again, thank you very much. We're going to have the family follow behind first, then everyone else is welcome to follow.